Bon, bonjour à tous. Hi everyone. Grüezi miteinander. I'm going to do my speech in English as I'm very bad in German. So anyway, I don't know if you know a bit about Swiss politics. Who's Swiss, who's not? Just to have a bit of an overview. Because I'm going to talk about the very specificities and intricacies of the Swiss political system, as well as democracy. So if there are things that you don't understand or get, because maybe you don't have the knowledge or not used to how our crazy-ass democracy do work, just raise your hand and I can try to explain. I'm going to make like a short overview of what happened during those last 20 years on cannabis policy in Switzerland. My aim today is, how to say that, make it fast, so we can have a bit of discussion afterwards, questions and things like this. I'll try to be fast. So, as you all might know, or maybe it's not new for you, or maybe it's new for you, Switzerland has a long-standing tradition of cannabis use and cannabis cultivation. It's always been part of somehow our landscape, may it be agricultural or in different places where grandma used to make preparations to soothe their husband when they had a long day of work. We also know that there was this little expression in Switzerland which is quite famous. We said la pipe du dimanche, Sunday pipe. So we knew that in all those backyards there was some kind of plant that was some kind of good. At least it soothes the pain after a long day of work. Cannabis culture also, for the older, I would say, has always been kind of associated to this alternative culture, how to say that, and some kind of subversion. It was, for a long time, 60s, 70s, 80s, beginning of 90s, considered as subversive to consume those type of products. We all know the hippies, we all know those cultures and groups. So it was also the same in Switzerland. We had our tradition of alternative, we had our groups that were contesting the situation and all of that. And they were somehow linked to this cannabis culture widely understood. I'm a sociologist, I'm not a farmer. There was also some kind of perceived level of tolerance about consumption, about production, and some kind of trade, we'll say. What we can say is that it was some kind of the opposite, the use of this theoretical division between hard drugs and soft drugs. We all know that the regulation around it is very undefined. We have the very text, the very specific text is complicated, subject to interpretation, may it be from the judges or for the policeman who's going to arrest the person. So there's a lot of arbitrary, there's a lot of inequity between inhabitants, between cantons, and you can see like it's reported, it's public, it's some social research that has been done on that. But more than that, it's totally inefficient. Inefficient in a policy analysis perspective, meaning that it cannot attain its goal. It cannot attain its goal because the goal was what? To eradicate culture and consumption. Anyway, we all know that during the late 90s, early 2000s, there was kind of huge cannabis in Switzerland. We had like this kind of gray market. Many shops did sell weed. It was kind of tolerated by the authorities, at least it was known by them. In some municipalities, it was all organized with the authorities, etc., etc. At this time, several reports say that Switzerland was a net exporter and one of the biggest producers in Europe, and we did win Cannabis Cup, High Time Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam. Bernard Rappa. And actually, that was what I wanted to say, that we had also international public figures. Bernard Rappa was known for everyone, by a lot of people. Some others too. So it was quite of an organized system, which was quite well running. The guys, of course, the industry player would say, began to organize themselves, which is normal. Any kind of economic sector do organize itself to defend its interest. So they made this coordination suisse du chanvre to defend their interest. And what was also interesting, and what is kind of the same as now, is like all stakeholders expected political change. Political change coming from the authorities. Of course, we had a legal frame that was not suited for the societal practices. So everyone was expecting to adapt that. So, of course, several political attempts. But just to go a bit further, right in 1997, just before this initiative, there was another initiative, no drugs in Switzerland. It was refused. Then there was this draw leg initiative, which was supported by the following groups. It was rejected by the people, strongly rejected. I was explaining, everyone was expecting some political change coming from the authorities, up authorities. All drugs are regulated at the federal level in Switzerland. It's the federal authority it's the federal level who has the authority to decide what to do with drugs, which is normal according to international standards. So there was this full revision. The full revision was to legally integrate the 4 pillars, harm reduction for heroin users, the heroin distribution and all of that, as well as a regulatory frame, legal regulatory frame for cannabis use and production. This was rejected by the parliament. In 2006, seeing that the situation could not move forward for the 4 pillars, there's been an alliance between the left, Socialist Party, and the Liberal Economic, the Parti Libéral, who made a proposal to divide both subjects. Of course, it was accepted by the parliament. The parliament accepted to officially and legally integrate the 4-pillar system into its constitution. It was accepted by the parliament, but as everyone knows, in Swiss democracy, you can always oppose. So the very, very conservative did make a referendum, and so the subject has to go in front of the population. But on the other hand, the farmers, hemp makers, cannabis sellers, and all of that, they've been discussing with parliamentaries, trying to push forward their interests, normal. And there have been several exchanges, promises from the parliaments, but nothing went through, and it didn't work. So around 2004, this coordination suisse du chanvre I was explaining to you kind of led a new initiative committee to propose to the population to vote on the legal regulation of cannabis for adult use. The terms were kind of the same now as now. Nothing for the youth, strict regulation, and everything. Anyway, so they organized themselves in 2004. In 2008, it was really a crucial year because what? What happened is that we had a simultaneous vote for the 4 pillars, hard drug use, and the cannabis regulation. What happened was 4 pillars accepted 68%, majority of the cantons. So this is the L2 partial revision that was refused, that was opposed, I would say, in 2006. And the cannabis initiative was rejected by the people and the canton, majority, double majority. So you can see that it's also kind of like the same pattern of votes, against and for. And what happened? In 2013, 12, depending how you count, the parliament, which was actually not very satisfied with the situation, decided to decriminalize possession and consumption. This famous less than 10 grams, it's cool for you. What happened? There's been the rise of administrative discretion. What is administrative discretion? When you have a law, the person who applies the law has some kind of room of maneuver to apply the law. It's called discretion. And what happened is that the cops, just to name them, use that discretion very much. And we can see that, and that's also documented and everything, and in several reports, that it's a full mess. Why it's a full mess? Because depending on where you live in Switzerland, I remember the law is the same for everyone as it's federal. Of course, it's applied by the cantons. But is it normal that you have a 1 to 30 chance to get caught, depending on where you live in Basel or if you live in Geneva, for instance? No, it's not normal. We live on the same roof. So there's been quite an unsatisfying situation, I would say. So I was saying that this framework doesn't work. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for the cop, who use it with very much discretion. That doesn't work also for other groups. What is interesting is that urban centers, so we always say, yes, urban centers, they concentrate consumption, they concentrate the street dealers and all of that. So the problem, if you want to understand this way, is more visible. So what is interesting to see is that several cities in the early 2010 began to want to change the situation. But it's already coming from a long time ago, 2006, 12, etc., etc. So they formed this inter-urban working group. You'll see one of the representatives on the next panel. And all those initiatives were brought by the politics. The parliaments of the cities or the cantons, depending, decided they have to do something different for cannabis use, cannabis deal, and all of that. What to do? They hired, they didn't hire directly, but they asked for scientific to build up research projects. Those are the pilot projects you might have heard about. Under the research principle, of course, international law, you can avoid the interdiction on several occasions to create medicine, to do some research, etc., etc. So that was the strategy that was taken by those group of people, saying, yes, we're going to distribute cannabis under the research principle, and we're going to have the authorization from the BAG Public Health Office. Of course, it was rejected. Rejected in 2017 on the basis of this very strict interpretation of the law. What happened and what's happening now is this. There's a huge work in the parliament currently, and also a bit last year, to change the law, to change this LSTUP in order to make possible to have those pilot projects. Meaning that the parliamentarians are now busy working at adapting the law to make those type of research projects. On the other hand, there was this rise of medicinal, therapeutic cannabis, how you want to call it, that's something different. That's something up to you. In 2011, the BAG opened it and changed the regulation and make it more available for specific conditions. Okay, we might all know all of that, but there's been an increase in the demand. The system failed to be based on this exceptional character, because there's so much demand that it's not anymore exceptional. So what's happening? It was based on this limited application principle, meaning that you can overpass international law if you have very good reason to use those type of drugs in order to treat people. But it has to be very, very, very much argumented and supported. Now, and industry players that might be in the room do know that a new legal framework is under discussion now. So there's been also different types of demand from the society and different interest groups. We all know, and we are here also for that, for this change in the definition, the very definition of the distinction between good hemp and bad cannabis. So it switched between 0.2, 0.3 actually, to 1%. Before the 0.3, there were no threshold. Why? The reason why this gray market exploded also. So, on the other hand, there's been some actors within the civil society, legalize it, for instance. Of all the NGO that has been in long fight for till 1995, trying to help consumers having problem with the justice, they publicly said, yeah, we want to make a new initiative to bring that subject to the people, to the Swiss population, in order for this population to decide once for all what we do with this cannabis issue. We all know the beginning of the CBD rush, 2016, first commercialization, tobacco substitute. New actors, coalition of producers that also, coalition of producers and sellers for the EKSF, new actors defending the interest of the patients, and this came also publicly to this cannabis debate. In February, the market, CBD market guidelines, explosion of the market. Now there's more than, I think, we are about around 740 Swiss enterprise, not only Swiss actually, enterprises, companies selling CBD products. Lots of variety in the products, many types of business model. I'm not going to comment that, but we all know that's very highly profitable, highly competitive, and very, very dynamic market. In 2018, Legalize It received the support from EKSF with the mandate to coalesce politicians and other institutional groups around their project to bring these questions in front of the people so we could vote on that. And now in 2019, there's a new organization, association, NGO that was built up that gather industry, addiction professionals, politicians, and users. The groups coming there. So what's next? Because that's the question. What's next? I'm not going to do a political science course now. It's not my objective and all of that. But the federal system is very complicated, with many check and balance, meaning that it's very difficult to pass a law. And also that laws, the application of the law is distributed between the federal levels. We have this long-standing tradition of experimenting. The 4 pillars, distribution of heroin, heroin treatment, and all of that, for more, between the 80s, end of the 80s, up till 2008, had no formal legal basis. It was experimentation. Experimentation carried around in different municipalities and cantons and all of that. What we know also, the high level of politicization of the topic. What does it mean? That means that public discussions, political use, meaning politicians using the topic with, using it, yeah, you understand what it means, and a strong media attention, because they like this type of gritty subject. You remember when the CBD was launched in Switzerland, we had two articles a week, sometimes 3. It was huge. They all wanted to see what's happening with this cannabis. What we know also, laws in Switzerland are made in the parliament with a lot of help from interest groups. Some politicians, some of my colleagues do also say that laws are not made in the parliament, but laws are made in commissions, among lobbyists, and this and that. That's, among politicians, it's very, very known, I would say. So we know that those actors, I mean, not those actors, interest group actors are well involved in the policymaking system. Policymaking, what does it mean? Defining the problem, identifying the measure to move this problem, to make this problem less important, and to decide what is the success. So meaning what? Meaning depending how you define the cannabis problem, who is defining the cannabis problem, and what type of measure, we could say regulatory practices that are brought, impact the type of concrete regulation. We know also, in Switzerland, this democratic system is based on the militia principle, meaning that politicians are not professionals. Politicians, what does it mean? We all have jobs. Sometimes we like to do politics on the weekend, okay? Meaning that they are not experts, and it's also well known that on those very specific subjects, they do lack competencies. But I remind you, they love to use it. In policy analysis, we call those debates moral issues. Abortion, same-sex marriage, GMO, drugs. Those moral issues, meaning what? Meaning that huge divide in the society. Meaning that if you want to go forward with this type of subjects, you need to have very, very strong coalitions. I remind you, it took decades for the 4-pillar model. So now the question, and we can discuss on that, is what agenda will prevail those next few years? Will it be concentration on the therapeutical side? What happens for the adult use? All the politicians now that are currently working to prepare a law for the research pilots, saying, no, it's not opening any way for the legalization, because, of course, they don't want to say that they do support legalization. What will they do? Will they join this big farine? Or will they play another agenda? What happened with this adult use reform that is desired by several groups, but which is very difficult to bring, to make it concrete. So on this type of question, I will close and open the floor. Please. Yes.
I have a question. So technically, CBD consumption as a food product is not... Hello? So technically, CBD as a food product for oral consumption is not legal according to the federal authorities. But there's a loophole that you can sell it as a sort of a tea tree oil, right?
A what?
Like an oil that you apply to your skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I see many companies selling it with the explicit intention as a food product. Do you think that this tolerance from the police at the cantonal level is going to be enforced by is going to be changed by the federal authorities anytime soon?
So I promise myself not to comment on any strategies, enterprise strategies. But of course it's a problem. Of course. I mean, for me, but I'm not saying that it's a problem for me. Mm-hmm. I don't give a... Voilà. But what I'm saying is that it's a misuse. The same as the misuse during this GREA period. What were they selling? Sleeping pillows. Voilà. There was pure THC weed, which was quite good, actually. But they was not selling as weed. It was selling as pillows. So now they do sell oils, but they not sell as oils. They sell that as technical ingredient. And that's it. That's a bit of the same. And what's happening? And if you are clear on your markets, we all know that this is not going to last for several reasons, because it's a misuse of categories A, of categories, and because CBD is an active ingredient, and you don't have no active ingredients in food. So you have, at one moment, you have to decide which category you have to put it in. That maybe more political questions than commenting the industry would be.
Okay, fine. I have one more question. When you said dynamic, the industry is dynamic, could you clarify what you meant by that?
I'm going to clarify. In summer 2016, there was one company who thought being smarter than everyone, who tried, succeed in introducing it as tobacco. Tobacco, same thing. I don't know the proper name. Similars. What happened? They obtained the authorization and opened the movement. And there was one company. In the beginning of 2017, there was 4 companies. Now, there is more than 700.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are industry players in the room, but we all know that some failed. Some got bought. Some got bankrupt. So, yes, it's not just producing weed and selling it. It's also having entrepreneurial skills. And what we can see in this dynamic market is like the people who are running the company begins to change. Now it's business people. It used to be different type of people. Does anyone has a thing on what's happening for this policy thing? Maybe?
Okay, I have another one.
Yes, you may.
Okay. Does this remind you of the heroin sort of debate that was happening in the late 90s, early 2000s, with the parks and the experimentation?
Totally not.
No?
It's not the same product, it's not the same problem, it's not the same, it doesn't have the same impact on public system, it doesn't have the same impact on public health system. No one is dying on the streets yet, not yet, currently, on this type of things. I mean, it was a much more important issue. People were dying on the streets. Cannabis, who gives a fuck about cannabis except users and sellers? But that's also something that you can see in public opinion. It's not very salient point.
How do you imagine the authorities are going to handle the transition to legalization? Are they just going to... Are they going to give every company right now selling it as explicit food product a license off the bat?
But you know it doesn't work like this.
How does it work? Sorry.
I mean, I mean, for technical details, we can make consultations. Yes. Sure. But I mean, that doesn't work like this.
Okay.
It's now for the food thing, it's the European regulation that prevails, and that's how it is. Make your file for novel food produce. Spend $300,000 and wait 2 years. And you are going to have a food product.
Right. But there are other products right now that you sell as a food product that could be considered, like if you sell anything that's similar to a food product that's already been approved, the federal authorities will accept your license.
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
And you can try. I mean, all companies are free to try. Voilà. Thank you very much.